I stood at the back of the wedding hall and watched the man I once pulled back from the edge of everything smile at another woman like she was the reason he learned how to breathe again. He looked happy, genuinely, quietly, completely happy. And I had come here because a mutual friend sent me the invitation by accident, because she didn't know, because nobody knew, because I had spent 3 years making sure nobody knew. I told myself I would just look, just once. Just enough to close the door properly this time. Just enough to finally stop wondering what he looked like when he wasn't mine anymore. Now I knew, he looked like someone who had moved on. I was still holding my clutch bag so tightly my knuckles had gone pale. Outside, the city hummed the way it always did, indifferent, continuous, unbothered by the fact that inside this hall, on this particular Saturday evening, something inside me was finishing its very long, very quiet process of breaking. I didn't cry. I had done all my crying already. He hadn't even raised his voice. He had just said, "I think we want different things, Evelyn," and then he was gone. I watched him take her hand at the altar. I watched him lean in and say something that made her laugh, that small, private laugh people only give to someone they feel safe with. I recognized that laugh. I used to be the one who caused it. I turned and walked out before the vows began. Outside, the evening air hit me like cold water. I stood on the steps of the venue, all glass and soft lighting and valets in black, and I breathed, in. Out. In. Out. I was fine. I was going to be fine. I had been fine for 3 years and I would continue to be fine, because I had built a life that worked without him in it, and nothing about tonight changed that. I called a cab. I went home to my apartment. And I sat in the dark for a long time, not crying, not thinking, just existing in the particular silence of someone who has finally accepted something they should have accepted a long time ago. His name was Caden, and this is where our story begins, not at the end, but at the place where I finally understood what the end meant. We met when we were 22, it was a Wednesday, which feels important somehow, not a Friday with its promise of something good, not a Monday with its clean start. A Wednesday. Unremarkable. The kind of day you forget by the following week. I did not forget that Wednesday. I had just finished a double shift at the small design agency where I was barely an intern. More coffee fetcher than anything else, surviving on ambition and the kind of stubborn optimism that only exists before life has had enough time to wear it down. I was waiting for the elevator in the lobby of my building when the power went out, the whole block. All at once, I stood in the sudden darkness holding my keys and my laptop bag and a container of leftover rice that had been my dinner for 3 days straight, and I thought, of course, a voice came from somewhere to my left. "There's a candle in the building manager's office," it said. "I saw it yesterday. 3rd door on the right." I turned toward the voice. I couldn't see anything. "Do you always notice where the candles are?" I asked. "Only in buildings with unreliable electricity," the voice said. There was something dry and quiet about the way he said it. Not quite a joke. Not quite not a joke either. We found the candle. We sat in the lobby for 2 hours waiting for the power to come back, 2 strangers in the dark, talking about everything that strangers talk about when the ordinary structure of the world has been temporarily removed and there is nothing left to hide behind. His name was Caden Ashford. He lived on the 7th floor, he worked in architecture, he read too slowly because he reread every sentence he liked twice before moving on. He had a younger sister he clearly adored even though he talked about her with great pretend exasperation. He took his coffee without sugar because he said life was already sweet enough, and then immediately admitted that was something his grandmother used to say and he had never questioned whether he actually believed it. I laughed at that. He looked at me in the candlelight, really looked, the way people rarely do, and said, "You have a good laugh, not beautiful. Not pretty, good," like it was something dependable. Something worth trusting. I thought about that for weeks afterward. The power came back at 10:30. We stood up, said goodnight, went to our separate floors. He knocked on my door the next morning with 2 cups of coffee, no sugar in either of them. I didn't correct him, I just let him in. We fell in love the way most people do, slowly and then suddenly, without a clear moment you could point to and say, there. That was it. That was when everything changed. It was 100 small things. The way he learned my coffee order within a week and never got it wrong after that. The way I started leaving a light on when I knew he was working late, so the hallway wouldn't be dark when he came home. The way we started saying without noticing, we should try that restaurant, we always forget to buy dish soap, we like this song, the word that happens before you decide to let it. He was not perfect. Neither was I. Caden was private in the way that some people are armored. He had grown up in a household where feelings were managed, not expressed, where you handled things quietly and never made your problems someone else's burden. He was generous with his time, his attention, his practical help. But his inner world was something he protected fiercely, and even with me, even after months of mornings and evenings and all the ordinary sacred intimacy of sharing a life, there were rooms inside him I had never been invited into. I told myself it was enough. I told myself that love didn't require access to every part of a person. That privacy wasn't distance. That the way he showed up for me in 100 concrete ways was more meaningful than any words he might have said. And I believed that, mostly, but there were nights when he went quiet in a way that felt less like peace and more like withdrawal, and I would lie awake beside him wondering what he was carrying that he hadn't told me about, wondering whether the space between us was the normal space that exists between any two people or whether it was something else, something that would one day become too wide to cross. I never asked. That was my mistake. Not the only one. But the first one, the beginning of the end, was a job offer. I know how that sounds. Like a plot device. Like the kind of thing that only happens in stories to create convenient conflict, but that is what it was. I had been working at the agency for 2 years by then. No longer fetching coffee, finally doing the work I had come there to do. And a larger firm, one of the best in the country, the kind with a name you recognized, offered me a senior position, in another city. 4 hours away, I came home that evening with the offer letter in my bag and sat down across from Caden at our small kitchen table and told him everything. The job. The city. The salary. The timeline. I watched his face as I talked. He listened the way he always did, completely, carefully, without interrupting. And when I finished he was quiet for a moment and then he said, "That's a remarkable opportunity, Evelyn. You've worked incredibly hard for this." I waited for the rest of the sentence. There was no rest of the sentence. "What do you think I should do?" I asked. He looked at me steadily. "I think you should do whatever feels right for you," he said. "This is your career. Your future. I don't want to be the reason you make a smaller choice." I heard those words and something went cold in my chest. I don't want to be the reason you make a smaller choice. I heard, you are already a smaller choice to me. I heard, I am giving you permission to leave because I am ready for you to leave. I heard everything except what he actually meant, which was, and I know this now, with the particular devastating clarity that only comes too late, I love you too much to ask you to stay for me. I would rather lose you to your own life than have you resent me for holding you back. But I didn't know that then. I was 24 and proud and hurt and suddenly certain that the man sitting across from me was quietly, gently, very kindly letting me go. So I did what proud, hurt people do. I decided I didn't need him to ask me to stay. I told him I would think about it. I went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. And I thought, if he loves me the way I love him, he will come in here. He will sit beside me. He will say the thing he is too proud to say. He didn't come, he washed the dishes instead. I could hear the water running, and I sat there and let the silence between us become something neither of us would ever fully recover from. I took the job, I told him on a Sunday morning, the kind of morning we used to love, slow and bright, coffee going, nowhere to be. I chose that morning on purpose. I think I wanted the softness of it to cushion what I was saying. He nodded, he said, "I'm proud of you." I searched his face for something, devastation, relief, anything that would tell me what was actually happening inside him. But he had put on the expression he wore when he was managing himself, the careful neutral look that meant he had decided how he was going to feel about this and was not going to deviate from it. I hated that look. I had always hated that look. I said, "Caden. Talk to me," he said, "there's nothing to say." "You made the right decision," I said. "Is that what you really think?" He looked at me then. Really looked, and for just a moment, a single, fractured moment, something moved behind his eyes. Something raw and unguarded that I had rarely seen from him. Something that looked, if I had to name it, like grief. Then it was gone. What I think, he said quietly, is that you deserve everything you've worked for. And I think that me asking you to give it up would make me someone I don't want to be. I didn't understand. I wanted to understand, but I was also exhausted and hurt and tired of trying to read between the lines of a man who refused to write them clearly. So I did the thing I had been doing for months without realizing it. I gave up trying. I started packing the following week. He helped me with the boxes. We were unbearably polite to each other the entire time. The last night before I left, we didn't sleep, not because we were talking, we had run out of safe things to say to each other by then. We just lay in the dark, side by side, not touching, both of us awake and both of us pretending not to be. At some point I felt him turn toward me. I kept my eyes closed. I don't know why. Even now I don't fully understand what I was doing in that moment, whether I was protecting myself or punishing him or simply too afraid of what he might say if I let him know I was awake. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, very softly, into the darkness, I don't know how to do this. I lay there and I did not move. I don't know how to watch you go. He said. I've been trying to figure out how to be the kind of person who lets you have what you want without making it about what I want, and I can't. He stopped. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. Say it, I thought. Please. Just say it, but he didn't. He turned back. He stared at the ceiling, and by the time the sun came up, we had both decided, separately and without discussion, that the conversation had not happened. He carried my last box to the car. He hugged me at the curb, long, tight, the kind of hug that is trying to memorize something. He said, take care of yourself. I said, you too. I got in the car. I did not look back. This story is made by Withered Petals Story. I have looked back every day since. The new city was everything the job had promised, fast and ambitious and full of people who were very good at what they did and knew it. I fit in quickly, quicker than I expected. I was good at my work. I was good at being the new person, at being professional and capable and low maintenance. I was good at performing fine. I called Caden twice in the first month. The first time, he answered. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing, my apartment, his new project, the weather in both cities. It was excruciating. We were two people who had once talked until 3 a.m. about whether grief was something you moved through or something you moved with, and now we were talking about the weather. I hung up and sat on my bathroom floor for a while. The second time, he didn't answer. He texted 20 minutes later, sorry, in a meeting. Talk soon. We did not talk soon. I told myself it was natural. That this was what endings looked like, not dramatic, not final, just a slow fading. I told myself that clean breaks were healthier. That holding on to someone who had let you go was a form of self-harm. I blocked his number in November, not out of anger, out of self-preservation, because every time my phone buzzed and it wasn't him, something in my chest did a small, stupid, hopeful thing. And I was so tired of that small stupid hopeful thing being wrong. I unblocked him 6 weeks later. He never knew. I rebuilt my life with deliberate, careful hands. I made friends, real ones, eventually, the kind that call you when something is wrong and not just when something is good. I got better at my job. I got better at sleeping. I got a plant, a small, impractical orchid that I kept alive through sheer spite, and I took that as a personal victory. I dated, eventually, 2 people. Neither lasted longer than 3 months. Not because anything was wrong with them. Because they were not Caden, and I had not yet figured out how to stop measuring everyone against someone who was no longer measuring anything against me. I stopped dating after the second one. I told myself I was focusing on my career. I was also hiding, but I was very well dressed while hiding, and my apartment was beautiful. And from the outside my life looked exactly like the life of someone who had made the right choice. Nobody asked what it looked like from the inside. I found out the truth 18 months after I left. It came the way most devastating truths do, not with ceremony. Not with warning, but sideways, in the middle of an ordinary moment, from someone who didn't know they were handing you a grenade. Her name was Priya. She had been friends with both of us in the old city, more his friend than mine but fond of me. The kind of person who remembered birthdays and texted you articles she thought you'd like. We met for dinner when she came through my city for a conference. We talked about the usual things. Work. Mutual friends. The restaurant's extremely ambitious dessert menu, and then, somewhere between the second glass of wine and the arrival of something with cardamom in it, she said, I ran into Caden last week. By the way, I kept my expression still. How is he? I asked. She tilted her head slightly. He's okay. Quieter than before, maybe. He asked about you. Whether you were happy. I told him you seemed like you were doing really well, she continued. He seemed relieved. And also, she stopped. Seemed to consider something. Also what? I said. She looked at me carefully. He told me something, when we were leaving. He'd had a couple of drinks. I don't think he meant to say it. She set down her glass. He said he spent a long time after you left trying to figure out whether he had made the right call. Letting you go the way he did, I felt very still inside. He didn't let me go, I said. It fell apart. Priya looked at me with an expression I didn't immediately understand. Evelyn, she said gently. He told me he made a choice. He said he thought that if he asked you to stay, or to come back, or to choose him, he was afraid you would. And then he was afraid you would eventually wonder what your life could have been. And he couldn't stand the thought of being the reason you looked back with anything other than peace. The cardamom dessert sat between us untouched. He thought he was setting you free, she said. I sat with that for a long moment. He thought he was setting me free, and I had spent 18 months thinking he had simply let go. I drove home that night and I sat in my car in the parking garage for 40 minutes. I didn't cry. I had learned, by then, to receive hard things without falling apart in the moment. To let them settle slowly, like sediment in water, until the picture became clear. The picture that was becoming clear was one I did not entirely know how to look at. He had loved me, not past tense. I had always known that, or thought I did. But this was different. He had loved me with enough intention and enough sacrifice to make himself the villain of his own story. He had chosen my freedom over his own happiness. He had stood at that kitchen table and swallowed everything he felt and handed me a future with both hands open, and I had looked at those open hands and seen abandonment. We had failed each other so completely. Not through cruelty, that would have been easier to process. But through care that was too careful. Through love that was too afraid to be loud. Through two people who were so determined not to be a burden to each other that they became, instead, a silence. I thought about calling him. My hand actually went to my phone. I sat there for a long time with his name on the screen, my thumb hovering, thinking about what I would even say. I know now. I understand. Does it change anything? Could it change anything? Are you still in there, in the version of your life that doesn't include me, and is there a version of both our lives that still has room for what we were? But I didn't call, because I also understood, sitting in that parking garage, that knowing the truth of something does not always mean you get to rewrite the ending. That sometimes the most loving thing two people can do for each other is let the story they had remain what it was, beautiful, and finished, and entirely its own. We had been real. We had been good. We had hurt each other in the softest, most unintentional ways, and we had lost something precious because we were both, in our own ways, too afraid to say the simple, terrifying thing, I love you. Please stay. I don't want to do this without you. 6 words. 6 words might have changed everything. Neither of us said them. I put my phone back in my bag. I went upstairs. I stood at my window for a long time, looking at the city below, this city I had chosen, this life I had built, and I tried to figure out how to hold both things at once, the grief of what we lost, and the grace of what we were. That was 2 years ago. I am 27 now. I live in an apartment with better light than the last one. The orchid died, eventually. I was sad about it longer than made rational sense, but I have a small succulent now that requires very little from me and seems content with that arrangement. I am, mostly, at peace. There are still nights when the city goes quiet and something in me reaches for a warmth that isn't there. Nights when I catch myself rereading old messages I should have deleted, not out of longing exactly, but out of something softer than that. Something closer to gratitude. He taught me how to be reached. Before Caden, I was very good at being self-sufficient. At needing very little. At making myself small and low maintenance and easy to have around. He was the first person who made me understand that being known, truly, inconveniently, incompletely known, was not a weakness. I carry that with me. And I heard, through Priya, that he is well. That he found someone. That he is happy in the steady, quiet way that suits him. I am glad. I mean that without performance. Without the bitterness I might have expected to find there. I am genuinely, peacefully glad that he is loved and that he is okay, because loving someone, really loving them, the way we loved each other, means you carry their happiness with you even after they are no longer yours to protect. Even when it hurts, even when it costs you something. I stood at the back of his wedding hall and I watched him smile at her, and I felt the last piece of something settle into place. Not closure exactly. I'm not sure closure is a real thing, or if it is, I'm not sure it feels the way people say it does. It is more like learning to live in a house that has a room you no longer enter. The room is still there. It always will be. But you stop standing in front of it. I walked out before the vows, I went home, I sat in the dark. And then I made myself a cup of tea, no sugar, because some habits are harder to break than others, and I sat at my window and watched the city and thought about a boy with a too-thin jacket who noticed me standing in the dark and found a candle. He was my great love, not my only love. Not my last love. But the one that shaped the room, the one that showed me what it meant to be truly, vulnerably present with another person. He loved me the best way he knew how. I loved him the best way I knew how. It wasn't enough to save us, but it was real. It was so completely, painfully, beautifully real, and I will carry it, the way you carry something precious that no longer belongs to you, gently. And quietly, and always, like a withered petal that still remembers what it felt like to bloom. This story is made by Withered Petal Story. If this story felt like something you have lived, you are not alone. Some loves don't end because they fade, they end because we were too afraid to say the thing that mattered most. Follow for more stories that feel like coming home, even when they hurt. New episode drops this week. Leave a comment. I read every single one.